So we have one of the most influential banners of the legendary kind, and I didn't pull that badly. Starting off with a plus speed Xander, which now becomes the base of my current Xander, a plus defense legendary Seliph, which again becomes the base, and a little bit beyond the normal Spark, but I did manage to pull a legendary Robin. So in that case, starts with a plus res minus speed. I also got for my Spark, I actually had a hard time deciding, but I ended up going with the rearmed Fallen Robin. And this is just because it is very, very hard to pull them, but they're also very, very valuable. I also managed to pull two 4-star focuses out of the tickets, a plus HP minus res Jafar, and a neutral Brave Kamala. So all in all, I would say that this would be a very good average, actually. Not necessarily the best, because I did technically go beyond the 40 summons that I usually use. But all in all, I'd say pretty good. So the one thing that I've always kind of wondered in general about Fae is what do other games have that Fae does not? And there's also ways to look at it that what does Fae have that other games do not? And the other game that I currently play is Azur Lane. These are three of the things that I would kind of bring over from Azur Lane to Fae in order to make the game much more friendly to free-to-play players or more casual players as opposed to whales. But at the same time, these are also things that I think would make the game much more exciting, in addition to some other concepts that I have. So, first up is the lack of a dead end currency. And so, what do I mean by dead end currency? They are in-game items that are only used for the purpose that they have. So that specific purpose that they're used for, that's the only thing that they can be used for. They're not used for, like, you can't trade them in for something else. They can't link to anything else. They're just used for what they're used for, and that's it. And again, this can be any kind of in-game currency. Now, granted, there are ways to look at in-game currency that are dead end, but not necessarily lead to something. So, like, orbs would not be considered a dead end currency because you can summon heroes, and those heroes can either be used for their skills, for limit breaking, or whatever. So, for Azur Lane has the specialized core, which is what I consider to be one of the closest things to a dead end currency that they have. But they're used to either get past items. So in the case of these are the Superstar Mike for San Diego, the Valorous Sword for Warspite, and then the two charms for two of the Northern Empery ships to retrofit them into their better forms. The other option is to go into the I believe it's the Specialized Bullen MK3, and I made a mistake here. Which can So these can be either used to limit break ultra rare ships, which are very hard to get, or you can retire them for more specialized cores, a couple of coins, and a pretty decent amount of renown. I believe it's 30 renown, 500 specialized cores, and 12 coins. Again, not that many coins, but it does kind of allow you to go back and forth with stuff. Meanwhile, crystals and shards are phase dead end currency. They're not really for me personally, I don't see a use for them outside of what they're used for. They can only provide EXP, and the shards are actually some of the worst ones because they only work towards the specific level. You're going to want more of the actual crystals. I've mentioned this multiple times. I think we really do need a different use for shards and crystals, because at this point, this is the current dead end currency for Fae. It's not You could easily remove the crystals and put in like colored feathers, and it would actually make the game a whole lot better. So I've mentioned this multiple times in my videos, but I do believe that this is a point that constantly needs to be hammered in. It needs to be constantly reminded. It's just in general something that they might want to look into changing, just because it's, again, something that players don't necessarily use a lot. I personally have had the uh, universal shards at the 6-digit max for probably about 2 years. And that's just because I've accumulated so many of them, but I don't use enough of them. The next point I would like to make is that seasonal is optional. Azur Lane does get seasonal outfits for the ship girls. In this case, I'm using the Bremerton ones, but the only thing that they are is just extra voice lines and pretty art. That's about it. There's no real effect on gameplay. And then the only ships that are never in the normal pool are going to be collabs in the case of the Gridman, the second character, or like Hyperdimensional Neptunia, Hololive, Kizuna Eye. Every single one of these are not necessarily the best ships. They're just used for um, the library, like the number of ships that you have. In other words, limited release, but you don't necessarily need her. She's cool, but you don't need her. For these, it's not needed for any kind of actual value, just looks cool. However, Faye has had one of the worst habits in the entire that I can think of, where a majority of the units that they released for limited, not just seasonal units. So these are not just so seasonal as well as limited, legendary, and mythic. They're not only some of the strongest units in the game at the point of their release, of course, but they have some of the best skills available. So like Summer Aphram with attack defense clash, but also the alarm attack defense. You have Fjorm with spurn and times pulse 4. Although I'm pretty sure that Nino has that as well. Again, these aren't necessarily skills that are locked only to them, but they are certain cases like rain speed defense rain snap on Bridal Sayuri. We have Sturdy Surge on both I believe Bridal Roy and then Hatari Nyla. You also have Guidance 4 on Rearmed Tana. You have Quick Riposte 4 solely on Rearmed Ganglot. Currently, there is no unit in the entire pool that has Stillwater at any point aside from the seasonals, mythics, legendaries. We have the young Mark and Lynn with Remote Mirror, as well as the Sabotage AR3. For Rearmed Ingrid, we have the Guard Bearing 4 as well as Speed Defense Hold. Again, I'm not saying that all of these skills are necessarily locked to limited units, but a lot of them tend to be. Like, for example, Times Pulse is on Fallen Byleth, but the other two units are Kaden Nino, as well as, of course, Summer Fjorm. For Sturdy Surge, we have no units that are in the normal pool that have this skill. For, once again, Stillwater, we have no units that have this skill. For how about any of the alarm skills, the only one that we have is currently Noah. And again, the same thing can be said for Remote Mirror, because I believe it's both Young Lin and Valentine's Leo that have this skill. Again, not one thing that really bothers me is this means that in order to compete at a higher level, in order to have lower end units compete at a higher level, you have to give up these 5-star units, when in reality, most 4-star demotes could easily carry around some kind of tier 4 skill in their kit, not just the blank year 1 demo 4-star specials kits format that they have currently. And then last but not least is that Limit Break is much easier in Azur Lane. And this is going by the idea of inheritance or limit breaking in order to make units stronger. Inheriting skills is Fae exclusive. The only thing that comes close to it in Azur Lane is going to be choosing what weapons and support items to equip. And again, that's not that hard. So I felt like it was a really bad comparison. But both of these games have limit breaking. So what's the example of limit breaking for Azur Lane? Referring back to the Bullens, so the specialized MK3, the prototype MK2, and the Universal, those 3 types of Bullens can act as duplicate units for upgrading your specific ship girl. So you only need to require that first copy. That's it. You can if you so like for example, Yuki Kaze is one of the best examples of this, as she's still really easy to get since she's a drop, but you're only required to get 5 slots in total. The first slot is of course guaranteed. You have to get whatever it is. That's a guarantee. But for the each time you limit break, you can choose whether to use the original unit or the Bullen of the specific type. Universal for low end, prototype for the gold, and then specialized for the ultra rare. And that's what I feel is a very good idea, especially since this also means that there's only 3 stages. So you're only required to get, after the first one, you're only required to fill in 4 gaps. Faye, on the other hand, is far less forgiving because not only do you have to go up to plus 10 for a unit, say Shamir, but you have to get 11 copies of Shamir. You can't try and replace her with the ninja copy. I don't know why you would, but you can't use the summer copy. You can't use another bow unit like Wrath. You can't use another bow infantry like George or Daniel. You are required to use every single copy in order to get them to plus 10. And then unlike the limit break in Azur Lane where it's required to advance beyond a certain level cap, the plus 10 units, they gain small enough numbers that it actually becomes insignificant. At this point, plus 10 a unit is just a status symbol that you went whaling on a specific banner. And having no alternative choices for any of these units to limit break is the main thing that I would push for the change. I would not stick it solely for this. Even if they just decide to do like year 1 units for the idea of putting in a doppelganger that could be used as a substitute for a specific move type, weapon type limit break. It would also mean that they could easily make it so that you gain no SP. Any kind of flowers that you originally had are gone. You have no you have to take an additional Bane to use them. Again, it's one of those cases where you have to realistically look at Faye at this point and say, why is it so hard to plus 10 a year 1 unit? And the realistic endpoint is that they're not getting any further. In fact, I usually say just going up to plus 1 is fine. But I would like to hear from everyone else. If you think that most of my ideas are relative levels of garbage, let's say, feel free to leave it in the comments. If you have something that you could suggest leave it in the comments. But thank you very much for watching all of my videos. If you like what you see, please consider subscribing. It's just to see what I can do, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.